Thank you. That's very kind. Thank you very much, Alex. So today is quite exciting for us because I think the conversations with the IAB started a few months ago when they came to us and said, you know, we're thinking about this connected future theme, and we thought, well, we're actually thinking about the connected future as well, and we're thinking about it in a very specific way. In a way that we're trying to work out, we see wearables as this next wave of the internet after desktop, really the third wave, desktop, mobile, and wearables. And at that point in time, we were really trying to work out what's the play going to be for us as an agency, and what is that going to start to mean to some of our clients and the brands and advertisers. So this is the culmination today of about 6 months' work in partnership with Goldsmiths, which I'll come on to introduce. And a study that's taken about 3 months that is launching globally today. And we're absolutely chuffed to bits that John and Alex agreed to let us launch it here at IAB Mobile Engaged. So just to talk to you a little bit about the team. There's 2 of us here, but there's many more in the background that have made it work. Within Mindshare, within Mindshare UK, we have Future Media Lab, which is really our kind of research unit. Which is everything from a daily blog that's updated to a community that we can tap into to carry out these kinds of studies. And Life Plus, which we launched at the middle of last year, running out of New York and London, which was our first wearables unit, really trying to get to the bottom of, and the real mission of Life Plus is to understand, you know, how do our clients start to behave in this slightly brave new world beyond mobile. And of course, working with Goldsmiths, and it's a pleasure to be on stage with another doctor, 3 doctors in the 2 doctors in the first section is incredible. Dr. Chris Brauer, of course. And when we first started sitting down with Chris, incidentally, Shift is our 3rd project with Goldsmiths. If there ever was a kind of a veteran of wearable technology, he'd be one. We were discovering all sorts of things about hearables and hug shirts where you can start to hold people and they feel on the other side of the world. So he's definitely opened our eyes into what's possible. I want to play a quick 1-minute film, which hopefully gives you a bit of a teaser of what we're going to talk about in a second.
Shift 2015 arose from our awareness that wearables were the next generation of these kinds of emerging technologies.
So what the research is about is looking into the future of wearable devices and how people will use them, interact with them, and what will be the opportunities for branding and advertising.
We had 14 participants in the study. Half of them are young teenagers and students, and half of them are adults. All of them are broadly into technology. And what we've asked them to do is take home the devices over the course of 4 weeks, and we've carried out a series of experiments with them.
So advertising, marketing, brands, they have a crucial role to play. And what's interesting about projects like this is we're actually trying to investigate what people actually want from that experience.
The project's given us real direction into the ways in which we think advertisers can use wearables. We think that will partly be about new forms of advertising, probably in the form of contextually aware push notifications. But we think the richer areas of opportunity will be around brands providing services and experiences that either sit on the wearables themselves or take advantage of the data that wearables produce. And we're applying this to the work we're doing for clients right now.
So we've kind of set up the construct, but you know, we've been in a world where we go to the corner of our room, or we go and sit at a desk in our office, where, you know, we sit down and we become online by using a desktop computer. Of course, that internet becomes mobile in the sense that it's in our pocket and we carry it around with us. But we really feel like this 3rd wave is the idea, and something that Martin's talked about. Is something that is kind of about you, and it's not just about devices anymore, it's actually about the world and connecting to each other and connecting to yourself. And of course machines connecting to machines and humans, and increasingly becoming more complex. So the idea is that we try and work out how do we start to behave in this space, because for sure it needs some reimagination. We're simply not going to be able to take the things that have worked in desktop and in mobile and just put them into fitness trackers, into heads-up display units, into all these different things that are coming now and are here very soon. We set out to do two questions, so this was really what we were trying to do. One is, what are the need states that wearables can fulfill? Where do they fit in within people's lives right now? How do they make things easier, quicker? How do they make you better at things? How do they make things slightly more seamless, perhaps? And then the second, which leads on, is coming back to the reason why we set up Life Plus, this wearables unit, is to work out how brands and advertisers, what's going to be the opportunities for them in this. I just want Chris, just going to hand over to Chris, who's going to talk about how we set this up.
Okay, thanks, James. So, researching the future in the present is a challenge, always. We've got an innovative methodology which we use, primarily working directly with 14 consumers over a couple of months, giving them a whole bunch of cutting-edge wearables devices and having them run some experiments, simulations, ethnographic observations, real-time feedback from these users in relation to various interventions that we were including with them, which primarily related to advertising and marketing opportunities. We then did a series of workshops. Co-creation is this exercise, so creating it together with the consumers to understand this vision. And then expert interviews, accessing people that have insight into the space, and particularly around technology, regulatory frameworks, data. And then a quantitative survey to see how our findings from that rich qualitative experience rolled out across a variety of UK consumers with smartphones. We were looking primarily at what these need states were. So what do people really want from the wearable experience? And we identified 6 different need states. We could also think of them as kind of lifestyles, ways in which people will engage with wearable technologies in everyday life activities. The first one, and probably the most powerful one, has been referenced already twice this morning. We can see the resonance of it. This concept of flow is rooted in an idea that so far wearables, although there's been a lot of hype, there hasn't been a killer must-have reason to include wearables in your portfolio of technology, and penetration levels are still relatively low within the overall tech community. What we learned from our consumers primarily was that what they wanted from this experience was to make life easier. And in that easier way, it related to this idea of a synced lifestyle and promoting flow in your everyday activities. What we mean by that is, for example, a participant that's got kids, that's got a pram, that's racing to the train station, that is using voice search on the way to get the train times that they're accessing, and then sending a text message to their wife in a real-time scenario. And I think we all see the juncture between the mobile and the human being as something that's become quite invasive. If you're walking down the street and you're behind somebody that's looking at their phone, it's so irritating, and the entire experience feels like a jagged interface between the technology and the person. Michel Serres, a French philosopher, talked about this idea of interface being seamless, more like the Northwest Passage, the freezing and re-thawing of the ice, the juncture between land and sea being more fluid than we might imagine. And that's what we have to set as a goal in establishing a kind of a wearables ecosystem and a way in which people will relate to them. And we found that through transactions, consumers being very keen on things like coming out of the train station and knowing that their package was going to be waiting for them at Argos as they walk down the street, because Argos knows they're on the street as they approach the retailer. Opportunities around cashless payments and transactions and so on. Interacting with the sensors around you, both in your home and in the city, and managing the communication flow, prioritizing messaging, having a sense of augmenting your own internetworked experience. Next one is reflection. Again, something that was talked about. Simon talking about the idea of the broken mirror, the idea of, we don't like what we look back. This is a photographer. So a photographer is a wearable camera, fires on sensors. It's born from a research project from many, many years ago. But what it's been profoundly powerful in doing is promoting autobiographical memory in people with dementia and Alzheimer's. They look at their day at the end of the day and it refreshes their memory about all the things. And we found a big resonance around a brand memory, a kind of wearing this camera and experiencing all these things. As you watch this video, you'll see many, many brands flash in and out of the imagery as the camera attempts to capture the interesting and exciting moments that are going on around a person. It becomes a chronicler or an archiver of your everyday life. And that reflection concept is very, very powerful. We've done a lot of studies previously around in the workplace and doing things like working with employees about what makes you most productive. They wear wearable technologies, we get a whole bunch of sensory information from them, and we can map that to other metrics in their organization around performance and productivity and say, under these conditions, you're most productive. You're most productive when you start at 10 a.m. You're most productive when you go out at lunch and get some natural sunlight. All kinds of very, very clear indicators where you can ask people, what are your goals in life? And then we can look at your data and we can reflect back against those goals and try to give you a sense of how to achieve those goals based on your own everyday lifestyles. Physically, that works very well. Emotionally, there was a lot of resistance, particularly around mood tracking. So we had to kind of anticipated tracking moods that we might see people quite excited to know that under certain moods, certain things, other things are happening in their life. So again, primarily related to productivity and performance and so on, and goal setting. But, you know, like, do you spend money irrationally when you're in a negative emotional mood state? Can your wearable alert you to this condition so that you don't go into the deficit on your credit card or whatever? Affinity, another very powerful concept in two ways. One being, you know, the squeeze, the hug shirts, the squeezing of your wristband, the ability to send physical signals over distance, quite attractive to people, these concepts. It brings an emotional connectivity, and it's very intimate, and it brings an intimacy to the wearables. It also brings very difficult junctures, like if I send you a squeeze, it's not like an email. It's not like if you open that email, and I don't know whether you read it or not. I know you got the squeeze, and if you don't squeeze me back, we have a social disconnect within that moment, and it's quite difficult to understand. But also within football stadiums, you know, of fans coming in with wearable shirts, the ball hits the back of the net, and in a moment of collective euphoria, all the shirts go red or blue, depending on your preferences. But you know, that capacity to have a much less intimate but still affinity experience can be very, very powerful. Performance, so you know, we know that the possibilities here are endless. Facebook's got Oculus, they want 1 billion users. They'll probably get it. I wouldn't bet against that. It's using an Android-like paradigm for rolling out this kind of technology around the world. I think we'll see a phenomenal increase in VA and in virtual reality and augmented reality experiences. The optic nerve in the human brain can access 8 megabytes a second in information. When you're staring at a computer screen, you're getting 1 kilobyte a second in information. Think about when you're driving and all the information that you can process in situ. That's the reality of people's informational experience and what they're going to face. And brands and marketeers and so on will have a very rich role to play in those immersive environments. Value exchange, so very, very powerful idea here. We ran an experiment. So you have face creams and moisturizers which are designed to be targeted towards people's sleeping patterns. The normal process is you walk into the retailer, they say, well, how do you sleep? You describe approximately how long you sleep, how well you sleep. It's a self-reflexive process which is very inaccurate and fraught with issues of self-reporting. Instead, we asked our participants, would they share their sleep data with the retailer in return for a much more targeted and highly specific product, which was exactly suited towards their specific sleep patterns. And we saw a strong willingness to do that. Value exchange and data exchange was an issue all the way through. Privacy considerations are still big, but you know, like Simon's saying, we're under surveillance and we have that. If this value exchange has a benefit, like telematics in cars and insurance schemes for drivers to lower your premiums, we see countless opportunities in the wearable space around that. And finally, self-expression. So there's a concept in theory called the paradox of the means. Paradox of the means says, you know, the means isn't a means to the end, the means is itself the end. And so buying the Apple Watch nowadays identifies you as not only an early adopter, not only as somebody who's willing to, but somebody who embraces the future, somebody who is forward thinking. And it's more about that right now than it is about the functionality that the watch offers or the ways in which it works. And in many ways from our users, we learned that what they were fascinated with was both what it represented and how it impacted their life alongside what it actually did. So 6 key areas around need states, and James is going to now describe to you some of the instruments and techniques within advertising and marketing that can access and activate these need state environments.
Thanks. So this was the kind of the crux of it for us, is working out. We know all the need states, you know, what are the opportunities within there. We came up with 5. The first 3 you'll see push notifications, paid search, data-led personalization are really extensions of what we know from those first 2 ways, from desktop and from mobile. We think the really rich territory is probably in the brand utility and brand experience. So I just want to spend the last 5 minutes just talking about these. The first, and this will be an obvious one, everyone will have had the nightmare of either walking down Regent Street and your phone jumping out of your pocket with all the beacons that are firing off, with your Candy Crush game telling you to boost up to the next level, all of these things. The role we really think for wearables here is to try and filter those things out. Something we didn't think about, which came out of the survey, was around creativity. That there was this idea that as the screens start to get smaller, or the screens go away completely when you think about hearables and perhaps heads-up display, is that the creativity disappears as well. One of the participants was talking about a chocolate brand, I think, and saying, well, what if the notification came in and the chocolate kind of drizzled down the screen in a way? So I think the rallying cry would be, just because the screen gets smaller doesn't mean the creativity needs to tail off. If anything, we dial it up. The second is thinking about search, and I think it was incredible the way Google were talking about 41% of people in the States are now using voice search. Voice search is a complete game changer here because you haven't got a screen to type on. If you have got a screen, it's a pretty appalling one to try and type things on. And of course, when you're talking about search, it's a much more conversational search. In the instance that Martin was talking about, if you're asking, what's the weather in France, your follow-up question isn't going to include the word France because you assume that it knows. So actually, as that algorithm change, actually the way we start to think about search strategy is going to change as well. Real estate is a massive one here as well. You're not going to have this desktop world of 15, 16 page search listings or a mobile one of 3 or 4. You may have one. So that needs to be absolutely spot on in that moment when someone needs it. Data-led personalization is another. We've used the idea of a mood ring here, which starts to take lots of biometrics. So it might take your skin temperature, your heart rate, and it might start to then crunch with an algorithm to kind of decipher what sort of mood you're in. In the example here, we've used a partner like Microsoft with this massive ecosystem from Xbox through to Skype, through to lots of other things. So actually, when I then go on and check my Outlook account, it might be that the ad I'm targeted with or the content that I get is relating to the mood that's collected on the wearables. We think it goes beyond advertising. We think the opportunity for content producers here is incredible. If you think about Netflix, if Netflix could give you films and suggestions based on how you're feeling at the time and the weather and all these other things that kind of mash in together, that feels quite special. The fourth is thinking about brand utility, and Mark hopefully won't mind me using Flora as a mock-up example here, but how Flora could have some real estate within a wearable that could start to talk to you about being heart healthy and actually start addressing issues around cholesterol. So the wearable device is doing all of that tracking of the things, the steps that you're covering, your heart rate, all of these body temperature things, and actually Flora is that very intimate thing that might be sat on your wrist that is starting to make suggestions about how you should exercise and the different things you can do. It might start to suggest different diet patterns for you. It might even ping you to tell you when to get up and take the exercise so you can bring that cholesterol down. So really brands starting to build these very intimate one-to-one relationships with people based on that transfer of data, and coming back to the idea that Chris was talking about earlier. And the final one is around brand experience, and I think this is a massively exciting space. There's a company here called Lightwave that we're working with. They're based in California, incredible company who build these wearable bands. The example here is something they did with Pepsi last year at South by Southwest. The band goes on your wrist, they invite 100 people to a gig, and the band starts to take out all of your biometrics to the point where the biometrics are actually controlling the gig. So the heart rate of the people and how hard they're partying starts to control the BPM of the gig. When the perspiration gets to a certain level and they can see it, they start to release the drinks. There were dance-offs between men and women, and all of these things, this physical and digital, aren't separate anymore. They are kind of one in the same. It's as much as you see it in showrooming in shops as you start to see it with things like this. We've got a couple of big projects that I can't talk lots about today, but coming in the summer, there's one here and one in the States that when we can, we'll love to share with you working with Lightwave. So the final thing I just want to talk about is how we started to map these. We've thought about what's actually happening on the device. That could be something that sits in your ear or on your wrist or as a pair of glasses, and actually whether it's advertising and content. And as I've said, these things are really kind of extensions of the things that we know already. They will require brands and advertisers to kind of tweak their thinking. If you think about search, you need a slightly different strategy for a conversational search on a wearable than you might do on a desktop, for example. And then on the right-hand side, this is where we think the opportunities are. And these opportunities are kind of are happening now. There's some YouGov data, which is the line in the blue, which takes UK penetration of wearables amongst adults up to about 10% at the end of last year. Based on the panel of 841 people that we went out and talked to afterwards in the study, we started to model out a kind of a best case scenario, a slightly diluted scenario, and something in the middle where we think at the beginning of next year that wearables penetration amongst UK adults will reach around 20%. And of course, that kind of elephant in the room is Apple Watch, which, unbeknownst to us, Tim Cook wasn't willing to move the launch date to accommodate our research. But actually, you can see that kind of going one of two ways. If it's this incredibly successful thing, which my personal feeling is that it's already starting to change the way we do things, then you could start to see us almost go to that 30%. The last thing to say is that, as I've said, the research has kind of been embargoed up until now. It's launching globally. It's kind of firing out all over the place. You can follow us on Future Media Lab or at Mindshare UK. You can get the full report, the videos of lots of the experts that we talked to, lots of the panelists, and then how we can help you approach this brave new world of wearable technology. So thank you.